Boy, this is a story that really cries out to be told. The story I'm about to tell you is pretty extraordinary. It's going to sound kind of risque at first, but I promise you it's very, very tame. However, the person who tells this is such an excellent storyteller. I almost wish I had everything that he had told me in pieces over the last couple of years. Let me explain. So, this story is told by a man I'm going to just call Mr. Whiston. Mr. Whiston, not his real name, is a Canadian, and he's pretty far north up there. And Mr. Whiston is or was formerly a school teacher, but lost his job as a result of what a young gay male did to pursue him. You heard it right. A young gay male teenager did to pursue him. And of course, this shouldn't surprise us. You know, when you're an adolescent, you are part child and you're part adult. And you are trapped in that intermediate stage. I used to kid my students and say they were in the larval stage of adulthood, of humankind, as you are moving along there, trying to, you know, deal with childish thoughts and actions and behaviors, and yet also have these new, strange adult feelings and experiences and desires and so forth that you're not quite sure how to handle. Well, I'm going to go back a little bit and tell this story as Mr. Whiston had explained it to me, and as he had related it to me. It's quite extraordinary. So this goes back to when Mr. Whiston was maybe 9 years old, at a time in rural Canada, where you had very, very close knit communities, and these communities were very close because they were small. And everybody knew everybody, just like in rural America today, or rural America 40 years ago when I grew up in rural America near the Canadian border. And so, what Mr. Whiston is telling me here in this interesting story is kind of amazing. So, let me just get into it then. So Mr. Whiston was being bullied one day. He was being attacked. I'm wearing my Chantilly Bully No More shirt to symbolize this in an odd way, because it's kind of a very minor part of the story, but here goes. So Mr. Whiston was being chased by a bully on the playground. Mr. Whiston, the little boy Whiston, went running into an area of the school that he was not allowed to be, where he was confronted by one of his teachers, who he thought was very, very mean. And the teacher spanked him and sent him on his way, which was allowed at one point, as I remember the story. And he went on his way, and he kind of felt that he kind of enjoyed the spanking. It was kind of an unusual thing. His parents were a little distant. They did not know he was gay. He didn't really realize it either. It came to pass over time that this particular school teacher, whose name I also won't name, who is now deceased, many years now, went after this family in a way, but not in a bad way. He just somehow got involved in this family's life by taking a shine to this young boy. It turns out the teacher was himself gay and rather awkward, and didn't know how to express his feelings toward this young kid. Don't worry, it's a very tame story. So he began coming over to the house. The kid was ill. He brought homework, and as I recall, very, very awkwardly, but the parents took a liking to him, and they invited him to dinner. He was a loner. He was a single man, and he seemed to be very nice to the boy, and so they allowed him to come over. And the boy was extremely uncomfortable. After all, this was the man who had spanked him. He didn't know how to deal with his feelings necessarily. He didn't particularly like the man. And as he described it to me, he was very rude to this older man who he didn't realize was gay. He didn't understand the man's attentions. Well, years went by, and the man passed away. And Mr. Whiston, who became a professional teacher himself at that time, although he said he was a marginal student, barely made a couple of degrees, but was very conscientious teacher, as his teachers were, read in the paper that an obituary written by a man he did not know. The man he did not know was his former teacher, the teacher who spanked him, that teacher's partner, who talked about how this teacher was a very decent and wonderful man, how he was often misunderstood, how he was loving and kind and sweet, and how they had met, interestingly enough, when this young man had graduated from college. And I may have it right here that this young man who wrote the obituary was a former student, but I can't swear to that. I don't remember. But there was a considerable age difference of some 20 years between the man who wrote the obituary and Mr. Whiston's former teacher that had spanked him, if you're following me so far. Now we get to the interesting part that I do have handy here, and I want to read it to you. So he says to me, hello. He says, I've got to give you a little bit more information. Okay, so years past, Mr. Whiston taught. Before I can get to this last part, Mr. Whiston taught, and it came to pass that he had a young admirer, very much like his older teacher when he was a boy, but this time the role was reversed. He was the teacher who was unwilling, and he had a young, struggling student who had taken a shine to him and was clearly gay. The student expressed in an awkward fashion his interest in the teacher, tried to touch the teacher, hug the teacher, even caressed the teacher. And the teacher, Mr. Whiston, said, "You cannot do this, and I've warned you gently a number of times, and so you have to leave my classroom." And he kicked the boy out of the classroom. The boy was so distraught, so upset at this, that what he did was he turned around and said that the teacher had tried to molest him. Mr. Whiston was set upon at one point in his classroom. He was taken aside. The police were there. He was stripped of his duties. He was fired, and they began an inquiry. And this went on for many, many months. Mr. Whiston was very distraught. He was very upset. And now we get to the part where the young boy is on the witness stand, and he is testifying against Mr. Whiston. So here I'm going to read the last little bit. Again, Mr. Whiston had cancer, and he has related this to me bits and pieces over 2 years. He is now cancer-free, but he's quite old. And I had asked him, since he left me in the middle of the story, if he wouldn't mind giving me at least an abridged version, and that's what he's done here. So here I go. Hi, more on the boy on the stand as you requested. Well, prior to the last day of the trial, I met with my lawyer. I felt the trial was going badly, and he confirmed it. He said the false testimony of the policeman who claimed I had confessed to him really hurt us. Further, I should prepare myself mentally to spend some time in jail. I asked, what if the boy confessed that he had been lying? Obviously, he replied, their case falls apart. At that point, I insisted he meaning the lawyer, put him, meaning the boy, back on the stand and try for a home run. Look, he warned me, I can do that, but the boy will invariably break down in tears. You will have lost what little hope we have. And I editorialize here, I don't know what the Crown policy is, Canadian law is there. In the U.S., if the boy was particularly young, they probably would not put him on the stand, but regardless of that, they did here. Reading again. The judge might impose an even tougher sentence, the lawyer told Mr. Whiston. I'll remember my response to this dying day, Whiston tells me. Look, I know I am innocent. I feel I have nothing to lose. Go for it. My lawyer was very gentle, and the boy at last began to tell the truth. He admitted liking me very much. He admitted following me around in the schoolyard, trying to hold hands several times, much to my objection. He told me of the many times he voluntarily visited my classroom after hours, hoping I would be there. He even admitted that I had objected with some of his activity when he came to my desk to ask for help. The Crown objected strenuously to the grilling by my lawyer, but thankfully the judge allowed my lawyer to continue. Then came the key question. What did you do after Mr. Whiston threw you out? It was at that point the boy broke down in hysterical tears. The judge called for a 15-minute recess. The 15 minutes, however, turned into 20 and then 30 minutes. Finally, the Crown, that is the prosecution, reappeared, but the boy did not. Again, I remember the Crown's words. Quote, Your Honor, the boy has confessed to us that he made up the entire list of allegations against Mr. Whiston. It would be too traumatic to put him back on the stand. Accordingly, the Crown wishes to withdraw all charges against Mr. Whiston. 20 minutes later, the jury had been dismissed and I was a free man. 4 exclamation marks. As an aside, listen to this part. As an aside, Mr. Whiston continues, the cop who related my confession, quote unquote, committed suicide a few months later. I shed no tears. This is Mr. Whiston, not his real name, from far north Canada, finally relaying the rest of the story that he told me. Pretty extraordinary, isn't it? We know for a fact that young people can be pursuers, although they're usually perceived entirely as victims. We do know that older people are victims of police misconduct at times, although not always. Remember, police are not always villains. The so-called sex offender is not always a villain, not always guilty, and the police are not always villains. The situation's far more complicated and nuanced than people realize. It would be nice if they really understood the facts that what we're dealing with really here is a war on sex. What would they have done to this man if the boy had been believed? How would the boy, later as a man, had felt, I wonder, if he had destroyed this man's entire life by having him jailed? It's bad enough he destroyed his career. Fortunately, Mr. Whiston was able to start a very successful second career after this, and his reputation was somewhat improved. But there are some people who would never believe it no matter what. Just like some of the people reading some of the stories or listening to the podcasts or the things we relate on my channel or other channels or in blogs also choose not to believe it. It's really food for thought. But if we didn't have this tremendous discomfort with our own sexuality and with sex and with understanding our bodies and with sex criminality, where we see it everywhere, except many of the places where it actually exists, then maybe we would be able to take a better view of these things and deal more effectively with real sex offense policy out there. This is Norman Michael Asian for ICAC Unpacked. Have a good day.